name is Zitouni Ould-Dada. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment. Let me just say that it's really great that we have Africa who's taking leadership in organizing this summit that is putting really so many issues that matter to Africa and to the world in tackling climate crisis, and particularly adaptation. We've been talking about mitigation for so long, talking about reducing emissions, which is crucial, and we need to continue doing that, and yet adaptation is also important. So let me start, since we lost so much time without too much introduction. I think the topic speaks for itself, and we have three keynote speakers that I would like to invite one by one. And we're really honored to have with us His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the 8th UN Secretary General, to give an introductory remark. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you for your very kind introduction. And I'm very much honored to have this opportunity to say a few words. Dear high-level representatives of governments and international organizations, dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to address you today during the Africa Climate Summit here in Nairobi in Kenya. Firstly, I would like to extend my gratitude to the government of Kenya for hosting this timely event to highlight the solutions of Africa has to offer when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. Secondly, I'm especially grateful to the many representatives at this summit for their commitment to advancing climate adaptation and sustainable agriculture. We are all aware that the worsening climate crisis is impacting every aspect of our lives anywhere in the world. It's further increasing the threat of violent conflicts, health issues, and food insecurity. Let us not forget the massive increases in global food prices are putting meals out of the reach of households across Africa, when more than a fifth of all citizens, Africans, are already food insecure. At the front lines of these challenges are the people who produce most of the food on the continent, especially in Africa. The majority of food producers are smallholder farmers, many of whom are women who are in charge of feeding their families. If we really want to tackle the climate crisis, we need to put people at the center of all our conversations and efforts. Supporting and building the resilience of smallholder farmers, especially women and youth, is needed now more than ever. Reaching the most vulnerable is not only critical to address poverty, but also to tackle imminent food security and climate issues. Because Africa is the world's most affected continent by climate crisis, we absolutely accelerate adaptation like nowhere. I have been speaking out and urging that all this financial support to Africa, which is just merely $11 billion a year, should be increased by 10 times, at least $100 billion a year until 2035, by which time it may reach $1.7 trillion. That's what I have been speaking out in this conference. In any way, now let me continue. I'm taking this opportunity to call on all global leaders, decision makers, and change makers alike to support research institutes to innovate, develop, and disseminate solutions to make climate-resilient, sustainable agriculture the most attractive and widely adopted option for smallholder farmers everywhere by 2030. By investing in agricultural research and innovation, we can achieve this goal, channeling more funding to agricultural research and innovation through global networks like CGIAR will accelerate the development of technologies that can be adopted by the most vulnerable smallholder farmers. I urge all governments to work collaboratively toward the implementation of innovative solutions to transform agriculture. A significant increase in public grant financing towards building resilient and adaptive food system offers strong returns on investment, address socio-economic issues, reduce emissions, protect the biodiversity, and make considerable progress towards combating the climate crisis. Only by working together can we achieve this ambitious agenda. Visionary and proactive partnerships must be at the heart of our efforts in the transformation of the agricultural sector for the benefit of those on the front line of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a productive discussion and urge you to make progress towards a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient future for all, leaving no one behind. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ban Ki-moon. We're really delighted that you've given us this time, and thank you for your words, and thank you for emphasizing particularly the importance of investing in R&D and in innovation for agriculture to achieve global food security. My next keynote speaker is from the African Union Commission. I'm just looking in the audience to see if the speaker is here. I can't see her, Ambassador Sacko. Okay, well, let me move on now, and it's my great pleasure now to invite my dear colleague from FAO, Dr. Abebe Haile-Gabriel. He's the Assistant General, Director General, and Regional Representative for FAO. Abebe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Zitouni, honorable ministers, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. On behalf of the FAO Director General, Dr. Chudongyu, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for accepting our invitation to this important event. I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Ban Ki-moon Foundation Center for Global Citizens for joining hands with FAO to organize this high-level event on climate finance for adaptation in agriculture and food security in Africa. It's paramount that we emphasize the symbiotic relationship between agri-food systems transformation and addressing the climate crisis. The challenges of climate change and food security are inextricably linked, and our ability to tackle one relies heavily on our success in addressing the other. The African agri-food system, which sustains the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people, is highly vulnerable to climate shocks. This vulnerability is exacerbated by the compounding effects of multiple and overlapping shocks. The numbers are sobering. In 2022, approximately 57% of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity resided in Africa, equivalent to a staggering 146.1 million people. Acute food insecurity driven by climate shocks alone accounted for nearly 1/3 of the overall population facing acute hunger on the continent. Furthermore, if you look at the figures between 2008 and 2018, 10 years period, about 82% of all damage and losses caused by drought in lower and middle income countries were absorbed by the agriculture sector alone. These figures underscore the urgency of our mission and the imperative of placing agri-food systems at the forefront of climate solutions. Transforming agri-food systems has the potential to yield positive and scalable impacts, not only in terms of adaptation, but also in mitigation. By transforming towards a more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems, we can simultaneously achieve better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and an overall better quality for all, leaving no one behind. In FAO parlance, we call them the 4 betters. FAO, in collaboration with member countries and partners, has been actively engaged in initiatives to drive this transformation. We are blending disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation by moving towards multi-risk management in agriculture sectors. We are committed to building low-carbon, climate-resilient agri-food systems, providing platforms for harnessing science and innovation and mobilizing investment finance. Allow me to mention the exemplary Agricultural Climate Resilient Enhancement Initiative, ACRE for short, jointly implemented by the World Meteorological Organization, FAO, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, Climate Prediction and Application Center, ICPAC, funded by the Adaptation Fund. This initiative focuses on developing and implementing adaptation strategies and measures to strengthen the resilience of vulnerable smallholder farmers and pastoralists in the Horn of Africa region, a clear testament to the transformative potential of collaboration. The need for climate finance to support innovative and impactful transformation in agri-food systems cannot be overstated. While progress has been made, financing for agriculture investment, agriculture development requires a significant ramp-up, particularly in critical areas such as climate-resilient agriculture, restoration of natural capital, and biodiversity, among others. We have ample evidence that investments in agri-food system transformation yield substantial returns. FAO has been collaborating with member countries in accessing funds from the Global Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and among others, for programs spanning climate change resilience, food systems, sustainable forest management, restoration, fisheries, and biodiversity. Africa urgently needs improved policies, increased investments in agriculture public goods, scaled up digital solutions for agriculture, and innovative financing schemes through public-private partnerships. Last but not clearly least is that we must address the issue of access to finance for smallholders, women, and youth. Innovative financing models are crucial to ensure equitable access and empower these vulnerable groups to actively participate in agri-food systems transformation. In closing, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you all for your presence today and for your commitment to addressing these pressing challenges. FAO remains steadfast in its commitment to collaborate with member countries and partners to drive sustainable agri-food systems transformation in Africa. Together, we can make a profound and lasting impact on the lives of millions and contribute significantly to climate solutions. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Abebe. Thank you to you and His Excellency Ban Ki-moon for setting the scene. And thank you for highlighting the importance of transforming the agri-food systems to make them fit for purpose for feeding and nourishing a growing population, and also to make agriculture an important part of the solution that we need to tackle the climate crisis. So this completes the keynote speaking session. We're going to move now into a panel discussion. And what we want to do is for you to hear some examples of enabling policies and also some successful stories of how some countries and organizations went about putting successful policies and measures in place that facilitated the financing of adaptation, and for some countries also that achieved really adaptation, particularly towards food security. So for the enabling policies part, it's my pleasure to start with His Excellency Minister Girma Amente, who is the Minister of Agriculture of Ethiopia. And if you could please, sir, share with us your key policies that you put in place towards adaptation and food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished panelists and participants. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share the Ethiopian experience. In Ethiopia, we have a lot of policies and strategies that really created the enabling environment to implement climate resilient agri-food systems. Actually, having policies and strategies is not as such a problem always. The issue lies with the implementation. But to mention some of our policies, in Ethiopia we have now the homegrown economic reform, which really looked into the opportunities we have in Ethiopia in different sectors. Now we are following a multi-sectoral economic development model where we have identified like agriculture as the major pillar. We have also other pillars like industry, tourism, mining, and the digital sector. But as Ethiopian is an agrarian society, we wanted to have agriculture moving first to create even the foundation for the other economic sectors to move, because if agriculture is not producing marketable surplus, there is no agro-industries, there is no services and other sectors as well. And of course, we have another strategy of the long-term low emission and climate resilient development pathway, which we have endorsed just this year. And of course, we have the National Adaptation Plan. And of course, we have prepared our Ethiopian food system transformation 2 years ago, which we are now implementing it almost starting from last year. And based on these existing policies and strategies, we have our 10-year perspective plan, which extends from 2020 to 2030. And all these policies and strategies actually call for immediate actions on the ground to create adaptive capacity and resilience, which is integrated into our long-term development pathway. Particularly, the Ethiopian agricultural food system transformation roadmap indicated the holistic transformation of the country's food system from production to consumption. We cannot only deal with the production aspect, we have to go from production to consumption, where we enhance food safety, nutrition, diets, improve livelihood, greater land preservation, restoration, and greater resilience to shocks as well. The question is, okay, those are on the papers. So what we look like on the ground in terms of implementation? In terms of implementation, really we followed a model where we focused on prioritized interventions and initiatives because we cannot do everything at the same time. To mention some of these practical initiatives on the ground, which is also referred in this morning at the plenary, is our Green Legacy Initiative, for example. This is an initiative of our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, and we have launched a massive tree planting program where we have now planted 32 billion seedlings in the last 5 years, including this season. And we have planted 566 million seedlings in a day by mobilizing more than 34 million people at the same in one day. So the population, the people are around this initiative, and this tree planting program is not only forest trees, it's also fruit trees, it is also fodder trees, it is all making the landscape more resilient and adaptive to climate change. As part of these watershed management initiatives, now we are having more water in the landscape for irrigation activities, which resulted in our national climate resilient wheat initiative. In Ethiopia, Ethiopia is actually a traditional grower of wheat, even in the past, and we are the home of the genetic resource of wheat even as well, but only we produce wheat during the rainy season. When there is rain, we produce wheat, and when there is no rain, we don't produce wheat. Now, as part of this initiative, we have now developed 1.3 million hectares of irrigated wheat by last season, where we produced 47 million quintal only during the irrigation season, in addition to the rainy season. And the irrigated wheat combined with our intensification of the rain-fed wheat production system enabled Ethiopia to be net self-sufficient of wheat production this year. So this is just happened after 50 years of wheat import in the country, and we are going to increase even more than that in the future. And of course, we are even focusing on the livestock sector to have intensification on the dairy system, poultry, beekeeping, and fishery as well. So these are the commodities now we are working to make it more commercial and make it more adaptable, because as you know, in Ethiopia, most of the pastoralists, like most of the Horn of African countries, we follow millions of livestock, but when the climate shock comes, we lose everything. So we want to really focus more on the quality, more on the commercial scale, and we are, of course, building on this livestock initiative as well.
So
but to just mention one on the limitation, the financing for the smallholder farmers, as you indicated, is one of the gaps where we are really struggling with, because we are providing inputs and technologies to the farmers, but they cannot really afford to buy and use all of them unless we made available affordable financing mechanisms for them to use all those technologies. So those are the areas we have to deal with, I think, with our development partners and stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very nice, successful story. I'm sorry to cut you short because we have to finish on time. There is another event starting here afterward. So if all the speakers can take 3 minutes, I might be able to come back to you actually for one short intervention. So please be sensitive to this. If I stop you, don't take it personally. I just want to make sure everyone is on time. So thank you for that. Now we move into the importance of research and innovation. And I just want to bring in my dear colleague Lindiwe Sibanda, who's the chair of the board of CGIAR. If you could share with us, please, some of the stories and policies for research and research priorities.
Thank you very much, moderator, and a big shout out for His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. He's not only the champion for adaptation, but the champion for Africa. You can't speak about food security, you can't speak about agriculture and climate challenges without emphasizing the need to adapt. And we have a champion, and Ban Ki-moon is one to bank on. Thank you for his shout out. He also made a call out for CGIAR, and I'm sitting here as the chair of the system board of the CGIAR, and I'm proud to say that I used to be one of those who used to look at CGIAR as a white elephant, but we are now fit for purpose. You've known the many centers that we have had across the world, but we have seen it fit that for Africa we align. We align by partnering with the African Union, we align by partnering with FAO, we align by partnering with the African Development Bank and with FARA the Forum for African Agricultural Research. This is important because without partnerships, we cannot deliver. When we talk adaptation, we are talking about investing in research, and it's sad to note, as the minister has said, only 1.7% of total finance was targeted at small-scale farmers when it comes to climate finance. This has to change. We now have the technologies that are on the shelf, and these need to be taken to the farmer. I'm happy that I'm sitting next to a success story where as CGIAR we can put our label and be proud to say Ethiopia will be exporting wheat thanks to the TAT program in partnership with African Development Bank and Ethiopia that has delivered this success. I'm proud to say I'm Zimbabwean, and my own country will for the first time be exporting wheat thanks to CGIAR technologies. And these are the live examples that we need to bring. Let me just highlight that in terms of fitness for purpose, what have we done for Africa? The first thing we've done is that we need a headquarters for Africa. We know that we have centers. We have the International Livestock Research Institute, El-Raghy, which does livestock commodities. We have IITA, which is our headquarters. We have Africa Rice, and of course we have ICRAF SIFO. But through the initiative to transform and align, we have DG Simeon, we have just appointed as the DG for Africa. We've gone a step further to have sub-regional representatives, and following the FAO model, we now have country representatives for CGIAR. There is no better way to take our technologies from the global centers to the people who need them most, the smallholder farmers. So as we talk about financing, as we talk about adaptation, let's have that face of a smallholder farmer, particularly women. We know in Africa, 80% of the food that I eat, that we eat, passes through the hands of a woman. Let's make sure that we invent a new way of investing by bringing in the youth, but also amplifying the investments in women. So those are the highlights. We have the technologies. I've just given a few on maize and wheat, but we have a lot more on digital technologies, on climate smart cattle that are measuring adaptation and also looking at mitigation, but also making sure farmers have access to cell phones, because this has been the fastest way to transmit our technologies to the smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindiwe. That was nice and short and to the point. Thank you. And you highlighted really the importance of smallholder farmers, and I hope maybe some of the speakers would pick up on that importance as well. Let us now move on into the solutions, other examples of solutions to boost finance for adaptation in agriculture and food security. And it's my pleasure to invite His Excellency Eamon Ryan, Minister for Environment, Climate and Communications from Ireland. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I would like to ask you if you could share with us also your perspectives on some examples of innovative funding mechanisms or partnerships that Ireland has been involved in.
Thank you, and I'm very glad and honoured to be here at what I think is a really important, this whole summit has been really significant to my mind. We are a very small country, but we like to play our part, and in climate adaptation I think it's not small because we tend to focus on it, and particularly on food systems and agricultural security. Some of the approaches are, well, firstly now it's a necessity, it's not an opt-in, it's something that has to be part of all our climate work. We do want to focus, and we try to focus on smallholders. In a complex world, how you get finance down to that level is one of the real challenges. It's often providing skills or information, weather information, as a way of increasing resilience. We have to protect nature and biodiversity at the same time as we protect food security and climate resilience. It's a multiple optimization we have to try and deliver. For our country, our approach is very much also as well, we try and address the most vulnerable. Each country, each part of a country has different circumstances. You can see that in Kenya. but in our mind, we should be looking to protect the most vulnerable first and most. And lastly, if I was saying in principles, it's locally led. We've been working with the US government on some principles from locally led adaptation, and I think that local involvement is really key. So then just turn it into some examples or specifics. Well, firstly, we have committed to doubling our climate financing allocation by next year. It'll be by 2025, up to 225 million euros a year. We will do that. We work typically with International Fund for Agricultural Development. There we increased our funding last year by 67% to 4.2 million a year. As it says, we're a small country, but if everyone was doing proportionally the same amount, it would not be insignificant. And also we very much work through the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, the CGIAR, which was mentioned earlier. And again there, we've been involved for about 6 years. And we again in COP27 last year committed to increasing our funding to 4.7 million a year for the next 3 years. We also, just to pick examples of what we're doing, we include some work with an agriculture innovation mission for climate, which is led by the US and the United Arab Emirates. And that focuses on agri-innovation, climate and resilience. And we're going into a joint venture with the US in Malawi on that sort of food systems transformation, protecting against food insecurity, protecting farmers' incomes, as well as protecting the environment. And it is, finished with this, in my mind, it's the farmers as the frontline heroes of the climate change challenge. It's their knowledge and expertise in their own land. What President Ruto said today was so true. It's a coming back to home with our engagement in this world. And that brings it down to the field. That brings it down to the farm, the village. And it's at that level, that inspiration, that everyone is the centre stage, everyone is the hero, the farmer more than anyone else.
Great, so thank you very much. Absolutely highlighting really the importance of farmers in addition to smallholder farmers in general. And thank you for sharing with us what Ireland is doing in this space, and particularly highlighted the doubling on finance and also the importance of innovation and in the involvement in the Aim4C, the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. That brings me nicely to the next speaker, Mr. Tamer El-Raghy, who's from the Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund. So you're doing a lot of work, as you heard, the importance of smallholder farmers. You're doing a lot of work on smallholder farmers in Africa in particular, particularly involving the private sector in the financing as well. If you could please share with us your stories from the private sector perspective. Over to you.
First of all, thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here with such a fine panelist. Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund, ARAF, we like to call it ARAF because it's such a long name, ARAF. We invest in early stage businesses that basically with business models that help farmers adapt and become more resilient to climate change. So our focus is really around improving the climate resilience of smaller farmers by investing in businesses that are with commercially viable business models and that are scalable. We are sponsored by Acumen, and we are anchored by the Green Climate Fund, our largest investor. Other investors include FMO, Proparco, Soros Economic Development Fund, and other investors. So we are very commercially focused, yet impact is at the center of our investment thesis. And usually people ask us, like, what do you mean by climate resilience? What does it look like to invest in a business that helps farmers become more resilient to climate change? And we like to give examples and say, first of all, we like to invest in businesses that address more than one pain point of farmers. Smaller farmers, the main pain points are access to finance, access to inputs, receiving proper agronomy support, climate smart practices, and last but not least, having direct access to market. So we like to invest in companies that address more than one pain point of those pain points of farmers. And giving example, I like to give examples. One example is a company we invested in. They started in Ethiopia. I was talking to His Excellency about it earlier. They started in Ethiopia selling day-old chicks and feed. No high-tech, nothing, just day-old chicks and feed for backyard chicken, it's a dual purpose chicken that lays eggs and builds meat. So farmers can have access to eggs to feed their kids and sell the rest of the eggs to generate weekly income. So now not only we are helping those farmers to increase their income, we are helping them to reduce their income volatility. Okay, so when a climate shock happens, now they can absorb that climate shock through this excess income. The company started in Ethiopia, and now they are in 6 African countries. Annually, they produce 50 million day-old chicks. Those day-old chicks grow, become chickens, laying 5 billion eggs a year. So you can imagine the impact, not only the economic impact, but the impact on nutrition for those kids as well. It's a success story. We are proud to be part of that journey. Another good example is a company that develops, sells, and finances solar-powered irrigation systems for smallholder farmers. Farmers more than double their yield. Their cows increase their yield by more than 50%. We are very keen on measuring our impact. We have impacted more than, since we started deploying capital in 2020, we impacted more than 850,000 farmers in 8 African countries. And more than 80% of those farmers, sorry, I was tracking time, just to be on time. I'll try it. 10 more seconds, I promise. We usually measure that impact. We measure the impact on their climate resilience, but also we measure the impact on their quality of life, which is super important. 80% of our farmers report an increase in income. More than 88% reported an improvement in their quality of life, yet more than 50% of them are still not resilient to climate change. So the picture is not that rosy. We still have to do way more. Yes, they increase their income. Yes, their quality of life increases, but they start from a very low point, guys. We need to do more. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that success story, particularly from the private sector perspective. We've got 5 minutes left. What I would like to do, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to say one last key message that you want to leave everyone with, and it's really very short, okay? But before I do that, I just want to see if the starts again. Let me check here. Okay, starting again. I just want to see if the audience, if anyone wants to make very brief comments. I can take couple of comments. Only if you're brief. If you're not brief, I will cut you off, I'm afraid. The gentleman there, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Otala from Uganda. I want to thank the presenters, the panelists, but to ask them that the threat of genetically modified seeds in Africa has not been touched by these very esteemed panelists. What do they think about GMO seeds in Africa?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Another point, very briefly, the lady here. There's the mic at the back. You have to run at the back there and make very quick comment. No questions, just comment.
Thank you so much for the clear instructions. A quick one on CGIAR's work. I'm really interested in that, and I'll probably follow up. I'm really interested in how you're supporting smallholder farmer organizations in Kenya and which specific parts you're working in. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. One final comment. Anybody? Yep, go ahead. At the back there. Here on your left. Look, just there.
Thank you. I'm Bishop Honorable Rose Atieno Kiseren from Faith International Ministry. I'm here to represent the faith community. I would like to find out how you are going to work with the church, because since I've been attending this meeting, I've not seen anything about the clergy, and yet we are the ones who are with the people every day, every time. And we are also concerned about the climate change, because it's really affecting us. When there is no food, the first person that people run to are the clergy. So I would like to urge you to put us on the table in the decision making for the world. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so obviously, there's so many issues to talk about where we don't have time to discuss that or answer the questions in detail. But I'd like to go through each of the panelists just to say one final message you want to convey. If you want to pick up on any of the questions that were made and to convey that message, please do. But please be very brief. So I'll start with His Excellency, Girma, Amente.
Okay, thank you. Just my last point is that we should start from the farmer's field. In the past, we discuss a lot in the conference rooms, in the halls, but if you go to the farmer's field, all researchers, universities, practitioners, we learn from the farmers, we understand the challenge, and then we can combine local knowledge and modern knowledge, and then we can address things more better and will be more adaptive. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lindiwe?
Thank you. And since Kenya is hosting us, I have an obligation to respond to the Kenya question. As CGIAR, we have a program that's called Accelerating Impact of CGIAR Climate Research for Africa. And here in Kenya, I can proudly say we have 73,000 pastoralists who are receiving messages via SMS on how to predict the weather, rainfall, dry periods, and be climate smart. So we can give you examples for country Kenya. Thank you for that opportunity. But as one word, invest in R&D. We have proven as CGIAR that for every $1 you put in, the returns are 10 times. That's why we are doubling our efforts from 1 billion to 2 billion for research to take it to the farmer.
Great, thank you very much. Minister Ryan?
I had the great privilege, I went to dinner last night with some of our civil servants from Ireland, but also people who are working with the development companies, agencies that we support here, Irish and local. And I think if I was to summarise the one thing I learned from last night and what they said, I would repeat, is that point about local-led development. We need the finance, absolutely, but we need to make sure it's locally led in how we spend it. I think if we get that right, everything else will flow and follow.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Tamer?
Yeah, actually following on finance, financing farmers is not easy. It's not a walk in the park, and it's expensive. Cost of financing for farmers to get access to finance, if they can get access to finance, to have access to climate smart products and services is extremely expensive. Cost of capital is expensive because the risk is high. But once we start talking about subsidizing farmers to get access to those climate smart products and services, we start hearing everyone screaming about distorting the market. While farmers all over the world, and specifically in Europe and the US, are fairly subsidized. So subsidizing African farmers will not distort the market, but actually it will make the market more equal and more fair. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Abebe?
Thank you. We talk about value chain development, but we have to really understand who the real actors and stakeholders are. And most of these are at the bottom of the ladder. Unless we empower this group of people, and we're talking about people, whether it's science and innovation or whatever, we're not talking on behalf of them. So for me, the key word is ownership, collective action, empowerment of the producers, the processors, the consumers, all actors along the whole value chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one of the words I picked up from the discussion really that is important is the local circumstances and the local conditions. So we keep talking about solutions, but we have to respect, the local aspect, including the culture and things that can work in one area, not necessarily in other areas. Another point I picked up is this shocking statistics for finance that goes to smallholder farmers. 1.7% of the climate finance that goes to smallholder farmers, and yet, as Lindiwe said, they produce 80% of the food that is available to us. So thank you very much, and thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for staying with us, and please join me to thank all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.